Hey guys, well, welcome to another day of working on this cutting board countertop. As you can see, I've got two more added sections that I have glued up here, not including the two that I have sitting here that I had worked on previously in the video. The reason I have two extras is because I did a little miscalculation in what I was going to need. I'll explain. I counted for 6 extra inches. The countertop has to be 42 inches long, and I have 46 inches in length of these two slabs that are over here on my left. And after cutting so many strips to turn it up on end grain, I have to cut them at 1 3/4 inches wide. And if I do that, just the milling room of the blade is going to exceed what I have in this particular strip of wood, so it would actually come up short, which is why I have glued up 2 more sections that are just as equal to the 2 that I've already got glued up. So, lesson learned, give yourself plenty of room. Or actually leftover scraps from the knot hole discards that I put in my recycle bin. I just cut around the knot holes that I thought were going to be a problem in the original. Do that, I wanted to let you guys know that whenever you do a glue up such as this, you're going to have a lot of messy glue surface that's going to squeeze out and just kind of start dripping over the front face of your work. In order to prevent a mess to have to clean up later, it's always wise after about 5 to 10 minutes, maybe 15, depending on how much glue you have seeping out, to let it dry and then take a paint scraper, just a little cheap one. I found this at a garage sale for like 50 cents. Very easy. And just scrape off all your glue, and even some hard glue will come off, but the longer you let it sit, the more it seeps into the pores. So you can scrape it all off, and that'll be less sanding or less work on your joiner knives later. Those of you that have never used a planer before, a machine planer, you definitely want to have hearing protection. This sucker does get very loud, and make sure you wear eye protection because chips, if you don't have a dust collection chute, tend to fly out at a pretty fast rate. So watch your fingers, watch your eyes, and watch your hearing. So we'll go ahead and get started running these through. And as you remember, I put these together in sections so they would be narrow enough to fit through my 13-inch planer. Once we get these milled up, then we'll be able to glue them all together because my drum sander allows for, I believe it's 36 inches in width, so I won't have to worry about an extra wide tabletop that time. Because these little ones that I made have all these little jagged ends on them, we're going to trim those off real quick on the table saw using our crosscut sled. All the edges are now cleaned up, so we're going to glue up these long sections and the short sections together and make one wide piece. We won't glue the short sections to the long sections because we're going to cut it up anyway into end grain, so we'll take care of that when we do the end grain cuts. You get introduced to the most luxurious tool that you can have in the shop, and that is my 18 by 36 drum sander. The table is a very wide sheet of fairly fine sandpaper, but the drum itself is, right now I think I have 80 grit wrapped all the way around the drum. And it goes at a different rate than the table itself. The table is controlled by a little rheostat knob right here, and you can control how fast or how slow you want your piece to flow into the drum, and then the drum spins at a speed all on its own. That's judged by the 2 pulleys. This will save you a lot of back-breaking work, either doing belt sanding or random orbit sanding or planing by hand or anything such as that. It's a little bit more of a finesse kind of equipment versus the surface planer, which it uses sandpaper instead of knife blades. So you kind of have to take tiny passes, like 1/64 of an inch, Okay, well, after many passes through the sander, like I said, this is a finesse tool. So very shallow passes to take this material off. But after many passes, I believe it is ready. It is nice and smooth. We've had, because this bigger piece is so long and heavy, feeding it in, if you don't have an in-feed table to help support the weight in the back, sometimes you'll get a little bit of snipe in the process of feeding it in, which is what we did. And I accounted for that whenever I made this a lot longer than the original dimensions. So we're going to be okay there. Well, we've got now set up the crosscut sled to trim off the end grain. I've already set up a stop block right here held together with a clamp, and it's going to give me the 1 3/4 thickness that I want. Okay, I've got everything set up kind of how I want it to look, and as you can tell, the end grain really makes a lot of color variations over the course of the board. What I have done to cut down on the symmetry is I have rotated every other piece. I've also integrated the shorter section that I made to accommodate the milling along inside of these longer pieces.
Now the glue up here is just the same as before. You just want to spread an even amount of glue on one surface, maybe two if you want, and just get them positioned how you like. Make sure the ends are fairly close to one another to being even, and then just continue down the line until you have it all done, and then just clamp it up when you're finished. Make sure that it's good and flat.
One little trick that my dad taught me when it comes to pitch on sandpaper, and this will work just about for any piece of equipment that uses sandpaper. Taking an old shoe, something like a woman's shoe that has a really thick rubber sole on it, and run it along your sandpaper while it's moving, and it will clear that pitch out. You might have to push a little hard depending on how much pitch there is on the belt itself. Okay, I've got everything set up. Got my circular saw set at the appropriate depth. I have my jig here to run along the line that I made, and I kind of brought the line in here and in here, so it'll cut off a lot of this stuff that didn't quite get sanded the way I wanted it, but like I said, it was okay. I made plenty of extra for milling room. That is the first cut to get a nice little straight edge to run it through the table saw for the rest of the way. So we'll set our fence to 18 inches, run it through, and then we'll cut it to length as well.
Now comes the time for a little bit of routing. We're just going to take a simple 3/8 inch round over bit and just run it along all four sides on each side. Once we have that done, we're just going to take a little bit of finish sanding. Now the finish of this project is a 2-part epoxy resin. We're going to put on some protective gloves and then pour a 1-to-1 ratio in a plastic cup. Then just stir pretty vigorously, and you can even pour from one cup to the other to help the mixture process. Then just flood it on the surface. Now as you can tell, I've already done one coat of this, but I had an issue with end grain soaking up a lot of the epoxy, so we're having to put a second coat on. Just brush it on and let it even overflow the edges, and then to combat any bubbles that come up, just blow it with a hot air gun. When you're done, you should have a nice self-leveled epoxy coating that should show no evidence of bubbles.
Alright, well, we have got the countertop turned over now. We had to use 3 coats of epoxy resin to get this looking the way I wanted it to, because that end grain just kept soaking and soaking it up. So 3 coats is what it took, and it finally came out perfect. So if you're going to do something that's going to have a lot of porous material that's going to be face up, take the opportunity to buy you a second box of that 16-ounce glaze epoxy, because you will probably need more than just one. I had to buy 2 myself. You can see in certain places that some of the epoxy did make it through. You can't see it on top, but if it's just the slightest bit open, you will have a little bit of seepage from your epoxy. And that all off with a high grit sandpaper. We're not even going to worry about the little roundovers here. We're just going to worry about the flat part. And then once we sand it all down, it'll be ready for installation. We are back here at the home of Mark and Judy Sharp to install the countertop. Now, as you saw earlier, I did take the time to sand down a lot of the excess epoxy that was on the bottom side of this unit, so it'll be nice and flat when we mount it. Earlier I mounted a couple of little brackets on the inside simply because this island just does not have enough meat to screw this countertop to, so I kind of had to add my own. There is a rail system right here in the front that I can screw to, which won't be a big deal, but towards the back here, if I don't screw it to the cleats that I just installed, this back will just be really loose and unsecure. So I went around a little bit earlier with my tape measure and measured many different points to make sure that it's equal on all sides. Now there is a little bit of bow in the back here, but I really can't help that. That's just the construction of the island. So we're just gonna have to center it up as best you can, and then you'll just screw it in from the underneath, make sure it's nice and pulled down flat. All right, well, the countertop is now officially installed, just needs a little bit of wiping off. I must say that the homeowner is very satisfied with how it turned out, and personally, I think it looks very, very nice with this hardwood flooring in here. So if you guys have any questions, feel free to send me some comments. You can send me an email at rhwoodshop@gmail.com. You can also check me out on YouTube and Blip TV, and I will be available to answer anything that you guys have questions about. So if you guys have a project that you guys want featured on Rockin' H Woodshop, feel free to send me an idea. I'll probably send you some responses back, and we can kind of communicate, and then we can just take it from there, and you just might see your project on my podcast. So until then, subscribe to my channel. That way you'll be notified if anything ever comes up and is posted to my channel, and you won't miss a thing. So until then, be safe in your own shops and take care.